Okay. Erev Tov, everyone.
With Erev Tov.
Here we go. I think that's right. Yeah, I do. Okay. Just one second. These are questions that were asked previous time. Okay.
It's by idolatry. It was by idolatry.
Okay, we dealt with that. Okay, here we are. So what I've prepared for this evening, we actually, we started a few weeks ago. We had uh, 2 weeks that we didn't have a shiur in the middle, and here we are again. So we're still in the same paragraph of HaRav Kook. Let's give a little bit of background. We mentioned that the Rambam, Maimonides, writes in the Halachot of Kings, the Halachot of Mashiach, of Geulah, he writes that Christianity and Islam are kind of on the way to Geulah, moving the world forward in the direction of Geulah, in the sense that they prepare the world to an understanding of one God and of redemption and Mashiach and so on. Even though they're false, they are a positive part of the process of the world. So that's an important basis. I mentioned that Nachmanides also says something similar, and Rabbi Yehuda Halevi in the Kuzari. So we find a few leading figures who enter into this realm and speak of other religions in that way. And this is a good background for studying what HaRav Kook has to say. And what HaRav Kook has to say is stronger and more delicate, more accurate. I'd like to mention, once we're discussing this, I don't know if any of you saw on the news a video of, if you're familiar with Shar Tzion in Yerushalayim. It's like the southern gate of the wall, of Yerushalayim, and Mark obviously saw it. And you see a woman, a nun, walking on the path there outside of Shar Tzion, walking towards the call it the western corner, the north southwestern corner of the wall surrounding Yerushalayim, from where you could get to, the big concert area there, which is called Brechat Sultan. I don't know in English, the Sultan's Pool, or you could turn north and go towards Shar Yafo and so on. And there's a nun walking there, and some man just runs up to her from behind and knocks her down and kicks her. Then he walks away. Then he comes back to hurt her more. And until another person stepped in and confronted this man, who was eventually arrested by the police. And what I learned is that he's not just an individual. There is a group. I don't know if you saw this, besides seeing the short video of this event, that there is actually a group in Jerusalem of religious people whose important mitzvah for them to do is to be violent towards Christians, to kick out Christians from Jerusalem. So it started, I remember a couple of years ago, there was a period of time when anyone of religious or of Christian clergy wearing a cross, there were people who would spit at them and so on. Actually, there was a group of us who came out with a statement against that. But now it's become mamash physical violence. And you're embarrassed as a Jew to see this happening. And then the feeling is, thank God there's another Jew who steps in and kind of balances your Jewishness against this guy who was being violent. So there are people who mamash represent this thing that HaRav Kook is speaking against. Now, before we get to what we're talking about, the international consequences, if we do this, what happens to the Jews elsewhere, even that should be enough to tell people to, hold your horses. But what we're going to see, it goes far beyond that. We started this a few weeks ago. What we have today is 2 pages. Those who are here physically, 2 pages, 2 sides of the page. Those who are on the Zoom, here you have it, 1 page. That's the end of page 1. And this brings us to page 2. Page 1 is what we saw in the previous time we met. I shortened it a little bit, skipped some parts so we could just quickly read it, go over it, have a review of what we saw the first time we discussed this, and then we can continue in HaRav Kook with the second part. So let's quickly go over the first part. It goes like this. There are those who think that a person cannot have a whole and sincere heart in believing in the truth of the Torah of Moshe as is fitting, unless he regards all other beliefs as entirely false and worthless, with no advantage whatsoever to those who hold them. But this is not true. And it's important that Rav Kook says those last 5 words, not only there are those, but this is not true. Indeed, certain ideas current within the Jewish people have led many among the masses to think this way. However, many harmful consequences also arise from this flawed way of thinking. Again, without going back into details that we did discuss previously. Therefore, we must deepen our understanding of the value of other beliefs in light of the Torah. Meaning, it's not only important to study Judaism and believe in the Torah and reject other beliefs, it's also important in the light of the Torah to study and understand and get deeper in our understanding of other beliefs and what value there is in them. They are not void of value. Therefore, in the light of the Torah, what value can they have? And then Rav Kook goes on and says, the worst of all beliefs are idolatry, which do not know or recognize a single creator at all. I'm sorry, before that, he says we must divide the totality of beliefs found in the world into 3 categories. Of course, putting aside and above the Torah of Israel, but 3 other categories. The bottom is the worst, is beliefs of idolatry that don't even know of a single creator at all. Above them are beliefs that have not been cleansed of the taint of idolatry. Maybe they're not explicitly idolatrous, but they still have a taint of idolatry. For instance, Christianity, believing in one God, but the Trinity and the Son of God and things like this. So they have a belief in one single creator, but they're not cleansed of certain taints of idolatry. And this is important because the Maimonides says about Christianity that it is avodah zarah, idolatry, and about Islam that it's not. Yet the same Rambam also says that Christianity is part of the process towards redemption, towards Geulah, towards Mashiach. And after Rambam, there are many other opinions, and you also have to separate Christianity into many different groups. Not all of Christianity is one. And you also have to think that since the creation, the birth of Christianity is 2,000 years, and since Rambam it's 900 years, and what processes have gone on during all these years, and this is part of what we might discuss further on. And above these 2 are beliefs that are free of all idolatry, yet nonetheless follow a path different from our holy Torah. So these are 3 things that we have to look at. With regard to idolatry, we said this in our previous session, we are forbidden to practice tolerance in action. We are obligated to devote all our deeds to bring out the knowledge of the name of God, of the one name of God in the world. Since humanity cannot reach its full spiritual and material perfection, except when the name of God fills the entire earth, it is up to us not to be tolerant towards idolatry. We have to not to be tolerant towards idolatry because it prevents the world from reaching its spiritual and material perfection, which includes, says HaRav Kook, that all human beings are brothers and must conduct themselves towards one another with love and fraternity, because if you have different gods creating different people, so just like the myths of ancient idolatry, the gods can be fighting against one another, so we, down here on earth, are the representatives of different gods fighting against one another. But if there's one God, then the result of that is that all human beings are created in the image of God and are brothers. And that's how we must conduct ourselves, even though, as brothers, we can have arguments, but still it's different. And also the individual elevation of a person to a lofty level of pure and true thought will only come in the world through the belief in one God. So HaRav Kook is on the one hand clear that we are not tolerant towards idolatry, and the belief in one God is what's going to bring out all the good things in the world. Thus, we are obligated not to treat idolatry with tolerance, At the same time, very important, we must not harbor hatred in our hearts toward idol worshippers. Let's say this nun in Jerusalem is an idol worshiper because the Rambam says Christianity is idolatry. We must not harbor hatred towards a specific individual, and we separate our argument with a belief. Or maybe let's look for something positive in the belief. And certainly we separate that from having hatred towards the idol worshippers. There is, however, says HaRav Kook, that's not it. There's another aspect as well. At times, there are nations that have elevated themselves in their morality, even though they are clinging on to some kind of idolatry. In spite of the fact that they're holding on to a belief which is idolatry, they have elevated themselves in their morality. And consequently, their idolatrous practices and customs are not as abominable or repugnant as those of others. There are those who have idolatrous practices, customs, beliefs, and they are abominable, and they are very immoral. But there are nations or groups that, in spite of being idolatrous, have elevated themselves in their morality, which inevitably means that even their idolatrous customs or practices are not really fully there. They are in kind of some kind of positive process. We see it more. So obviously that we have to study idolatries and separate one from another. One is worse, one is not as bad, and so on. Moreover, even within idolatry itself, there exists a spark of morality. As HaRav Kook says about other things, if something exists in the world, there's a godly spark in it. There's a positive spark in it. Otherwise, it doesn't have a right to exist in the world. Maybe we need to separate. Maybe there's one small spark of light and a lot of filth is a word HaRav Kook might use in Hebrew around it. But there's a spark there. And as long as we don't identify that spark, we can't really totally oppose this phenomenon, because there's a positive spark that we have to take out from there. And that spark may be, for lack of anything more, the very least that it would be is that out of fear of a God, of an idolatrous God that they believe in, people refrain from evils. They are afraid, they have fear of a God, and it helps them refrain from evils. And that in itself is a spark, a positive spark of morality that exists even within idolatry. Certainly, when we look at different nations, on their levels of morality, on the processes, that's what I mentioned. Not only we look at Christianity when it was created, or at other religions that are even more, with statues, with idolatrous beliefs, but at the same time, we have to study them, differentiate between them. Do they believe in one creator or not? What moral processes have they been going through in the last 900 or 1,000 or 2,000 years? And all of these things make a difference. So don't just put them all together, say this is idolatry, you're all horrible, we hate you all. No, that's not the right way to go about it. All this we saw previously. I just quickly made an overview of what we saw previously. And now we're going to continue slower to the second page. Second side for those who are here. In general, we must understand that the world is conducted under the providence of the blessed God in order to lead human beings to their ultimate blessed purpose. Therefore, again, the world is conducted under the providence of the blessed God. Therefore, we should recognize that as long as idolatry still exists in the world, it serves a certain purpose. You understand what he's saying? There is providence, there's hashgacha. If Hashem allows idolatry to continue to exist, it has a purpose in Hashem's world. Otherwise, He would erase it. So if He's running the world in the way of a process, He's not immediately wiping them out. Then we must understand that this is what Hashem is saying to us. Wait a minute. There's a process. You have to follow and accompany the process and not just obliterate them all at once. If we were to pressure people to accept the yoke of the kingdom of heaven and abandon their idols before they are ready, then instead of benefiting them, as we might imagine, we would harm them. We think that, it's always, let me take a different example. I believe that it's important for the world that our beliefs, are the content, the details of our belief in Judaism, in Hashem, that these things should be refined, and they are more refined than just I believe in God and He's powerful, and you better do what He says. But there are people who have not had a chance to study. They can't develop very abstract thoughts. They have a certain religious belief, or maybe they believe that kissing the mezuzah is going to protect them, which is not what I believe. I believe that performing mitzvot is a positive thing in and of itself. And if you perform them, then yes, maybe you're closer to Hashem and maybe you will protect it. I can't make any promises. There are people who seem to be very close to Hashem, and yet in certain instances, they're not protected. So my whole thought process is much more complex. But if I come to certain people and shatter their set of beliefs and try to put it in place instead of it, my more complex, refined, let's say that my belief is more refined, and maybe it isn't. Maybe I'm just being haughty. But even if it is, it might not be right for them. Maybe I want to raise children or students or influence people to be able to think in a more complex way. Maybe that's what I should do. But to take existing people who have gotten used to a certain set of beliefs and shatter that for them and try to put something else in place for them, they may be left with a void of no belief. Instead of moving up to a higher level of belief, in my eyes, they'll be left without any religious basis. Is that positive? Even within Judaism. Says HaRav Kook the same idea about idol worshippers. There are idol worshippers that if we pressure them to accept the yoke of the kingdom of heaven and abandon their idols, sometimes we might not be benefiting them, we might harm them. For example, says HaRav Kook, one may conceive of a person at such a level that only if he says, "You are my father," to a tree, okay, he believes in a tree that is his God, or he took some branches from the tree, and from those branches he built an idol, a statue, and he believes in this statue, and he believes this is his God, and imagines his God standing beside him in his house, watching him with eyes of wrath. Will he refrain from committing the vile acts such as murder, theft, adultery, and the like? Meaning the only reason that he refrains from murder, theft, and other things is because he sees this God standing next to him, looking at him, overseeing him, and therefore he's going to shy away from it because he's afraid of being punished. There are Jews who think of God this way. They just don't have the statue in the house. But they actually think of God as they create a form of what God is like in their mind, and they see him above them in the sky, looking down on them, and therefore they don't commit certain terrible acts of sin. And it's not that far from one another. They don't have a physical statue, but they think of God in a very much as a human being, as a physical form, as having human psychology. Don't get him upset, and so on. So it's not that far from it. But certainly with idol worshippers, they have this idol, this statue, and the statue is holding them back. If we were to think of the modern world, you have cameras in many places, okay? I don't know the statistics. Have cameras made places have less crime? I'm not sure. I don't know. It makes sense to my mind that people will be more careful, or they'll try to perform their acts, their illegal acts, in a side of an alley where the cameras don't reach. Do they know where the cameras are, and so on? Have cameras helped in solving crimes and catching the culprits? Maybe. Let's say it did. But does it mean that it's made the world a better place? I hope so. It's protected people. Has it made these people better people? I'm not sure, because it's only fear of punishment. But still, it makes the world a better place. And if we were to guide these people prematurely to the higher level of knowledge of the master of all deeds. Blessed be he that the reason for acting in a positive way, in kindness, in morality, and not in immoral ways, is because you connect to him, because you're living an ideal that will bring the world to be a better place for all. That doesn't work for them. So he might not reach that level, and you've ruined his level. His sphere might collapse, and we would lower him to the level he had already attained, than the level from the level he had already attained. He may understand, you convince him that this is just a physical statue out of wood. Don't worry, he doesn't have eyes. He's not really looking down on you. Even though we made him have a scary face with eyes that are really looking at you with wrath, it's just wood. It's just a picture. Oh, okay, good. So now I can do all those vile acts. And we can't bring him to a higher level of understanding. So even that very basic, very simple idea gives us the understanding it's not always positive to push people to what we consider to be a higher level of religious belief. You have to enable people to go through a process. Therefore, very interesting, the next sentence. Therefore, we are cautioned not to teach the words of Torah to the nations of the world. Very interesting. The Torah, the halacha, says not to teach Torah to non-Jews. You might consider this to come from sources of something which is racist. We only want it for us, we don't want it for others. You might say it's not racism. We need to create Am Yisrael to be a heart among the nations. I give special treatment to the heart that I don't give to every other part of the body because we have a mission for the whole world and we have to keep it. Or maybe we have to make sure that there's some purity that's left within Am Yisrael before we spread the word to the rest of the world. There are stages. First, we need to work through Am Yisrael, and then we will bring light to the world. But HaRav Kook is saying something totally different. HaRav Kook is saying, careful. I'm not sure that yes, I believe in Judaism as a higher form of belief, of religiosity. There's no problem, says HaRav Kook, with my thinking that Judaism is a higher religion than others. But that doesn't mean that the others are void of any value, which is what we're talking about. So careful. I'm not sure that it's always good to push people towards Jewish belief. Maybe that's why one of the questions that came up in our previous session was, does Judaism or does it not believe in what's the word in English? Evangelism? Proselytizing, right. Did I say it properly? Proselytizing.
No, proselytizing.
In other words, not like we don't have missionaries like Catholic missionaries and things like that. But of course, so I answered then, yes, of course we have an idea at the end of the road to bring the world to one belief in one God and so on. But it's a longer process, and we're not trying to do it immediately and so on. And HaRav Kook is saying one of the reasons is because there's a process that the world has to go through. Just like you can't make a child mature faster than the processes that his body and mind have to go through. And you can't make a plant. I mean, sometimes in modern science you can, but it's not always positive to make a plant grow faster than it would naturally. I always like to give the example of you pull it to make it grow higher. You just killed it. So, laat laat, as we say in Hebrew, or we say in Arabic, what's the expression?
Shwaya, shwaya.
Shwaya, shwaya. How do you say it in Yiddish?
No.
In Aramaic, kim'ah, kim'ah. One step at a time, There's a process that we have to go through. You can't force it. I know you want it to happen faster. You're right. I identify with that. So in the meantime, the world is suffering. People are suffering. There's so much bad in the world. Yes, but pushing the process as the old tale in the Talmud, in the Midrash, tells us, there's a rabbi, I don't remember his name, who is looking for the entrance to a city, and he comes to crossroads, and he sees a kid sitting there. And he says to the kid, what's the fastest way to the city? And he says, well, there's a long way which is short and a short way which is long. So you take the road that he said is short, but it's the short way that's long. It takes you quickly to the wall of the city, but there's no gate. If you take the long way that is short, you take the longer route, and you reach the wall of the city where there's a gate and you can enter. So pushing for the shortest way isn't always a good solution. Sometimes you need the longer way that takes more time, but it's a longer process, but it's going to bring us to the goal. It will take more time. And behold, says HaRav Kook, even within the darkness of idolatry, there may be found individuals of pure heart who seek to improve the ways of their people, recognizing that the true, pure divine light is greater than their capacity, meaning there are people who are within other beliefs, who understand that those beliefs are not pure, but they want to improve the ways of their people, and they recognize that the way to get there is greater than the capacity of their believers. Therefore, they guide their people according to their level through proper norms and practices that will lead them to greater perfection in the future. I think I've mentioned the story, which I really have to find once. I have to ask HaRav Yaakov again. I really remember that he quoted this in his book, Rav Yaakov Nagen. I think we actually had him on Zoom once and he spoke to us. He's a dear friend. He spent a few years in India, in ashrams, not because he was not he's a rabbi. He's always been a God-fearing, Torah-keeping, halacha-keeping Jew, but he wanted to understand more about Eastern thought and Eastern religions. And he wrote a book about Parashat Shavua, which on every parasha he brings the perspective of East and West over some issue in the parasha, and he shows the positive aspects in each one. And he mentions somewhere, I do believe it's in that book about parasha, but I have to ask him next time I meet him. Maybe I'll remember. I could send him a message. Maybe I will have to remember to do that. But he says that he asked one of the, what do you call it? The priests of Buddha, something else rather than priests. I'm not sure. Sorry, a monk. He wasn't only a monk; he was a leader.
The gurus.
The guru, maybe a guru. He asked him, "Can't you give up? Buddha have these giant statues." And he said to him, "Can't you? Isn't it time to let go of these statues? You know that this statue is not God. It's not Buddha. It's just a physical structure." And he said, "No, we can't. How are we going to get the people to come if we don't have the statues?" Meaning he was saying, I don't believe in these statues as gods, but we need them to bring people. And maybe, again, I'm saying, sometimes in Judaism, there are people who, they cling very much to the physical artifacts or actions, which are important. I'm not saying they're not important, but they are not God. They are not the essence of what Judaism is, but we need it. We need the framework. So the same way, says HaRav Kook, there are people, leaders in other religions, individuals of pure heart, who want to improve, to elevate the religious thought and the religious understanding of their followers, but they understand that the way to do it right now it's greater than the people's capacity, and they have to guide them slowly in a process that will lead them to greater perfection in the future. So those religious leaders in other religions were finding something that we have with us joint, that we have in common. So if you identify this in a religion, in a religious leader, and you see that he's trying to lead his believers in this direction, you're talking about another religion that is not Judaism, that you disagree with, that you think Judaism is higher and more pure than that religion, but that other religion is not void of any value. It has value, it has leaders who can help their people move along in a positive direction. Says HaRav Kook, it is indeed possible that outstanding individuals will be found who receive divine assistance in establishing moral norms and practices, which ultimately will lead those who follow them, elevating them step by step until they ultimately reach a higher level. It's not going to happen in one day. And it may be that these people are receiving divine assistance because in the society, in the religious group, in the nation within which they are functioning, they deserve divine assistance to help people have better moral norms and practices, helping people elevate themselves step by step until ultimately they will reach a higher level, until through the light of Israel, they will come to recognize the glory of the Lord, the God of truth. But they have to go through a process to reach that point. These practices themselves already possess religious value, and it is fitting to genuinely esteem them. They may be functioning within an idolatrous belief, and yet there is religious value to what they are doing today, as drawing closer to the light of God, even though they're still not close enough to the light of one God, the God of truth. They are drawing gradually closer to the light of God and sense that they are acting appropriately for themselves and holding fast to the heritage and the customs of their ancestors, because they can't let go of that, because they're going to lose their people. So they hold on to certain beliefs, certain customs, certain religious actions that they perform, because that's the way to get the people to enter into this process. So there can be a religion that we reject, we argue with, and we believe that they need to reach a point where the light of Israel will bring them to the one God. That doesn't mean they have to be Jews. They can be Noahites keeping the seven, Sheva mitzvot b'nei, the seven laws, and it's the truth is it's a lot of details. It's not only seven laws, but that's the end goal. But these are people who are acting and leading, creating positive things within other religions, and it might even be in idolatrous religions. Therefore, one should not conclude that an entire religion is wholly mistaken and there's nothing right in there, there's nothing positive in there. Nor should one treat its adherents lightly or disgrace them. No reason to disgrace them. However, this relates to the bottom two religions that HaRav Kook divided into three previously. Those who don't even have a belief in one creator. Even there could be positive processes. Certainly in religions who have a belief in one God, even though they still have traces of idolatrous details within them. Certainly, says HaRav Kook, religions that were founded upon the basis of the Torah, meaning Christianity and Islam, and the prophets certainly possess a distinguished value, for those who adhere to them are close to the light of God and to the knowledge of His glory. Nonetheless, we have to admit that there are people whose religion was founded upon the basis of the Torah and murdered many Jews and did other vile acts in the world, and some of them today continue to do so. In the past, it was more Christians. Now it's more Muslims, although in the anti-Semitism, in the ranting anti-Semitic things going on in the world today, who knows where it's going to come from. But nonetheless, there are other people there who are creating positive processes within those religions, and therefore you have to treat people after you check their beliefs, their behavior, their morality, and you don't put them all on one plate and reject them all, or have negative feelings towards them, or hate them, or disgrace them. No, you have to be more deep, more intricate, more complex, and look for the positive also in other places that you disagree with, but find the positive details within them. I'm saying this is something that I've seen HaRav Kook say this. This paragraph was new to me. I was not familiar with it. And I think it's a tremendous paragraph. And I see HaRav Kook saying this about Jews who are not religious, about Jews that I disagree with, about all kinds of arguments that we have within Am Yisrael. And I'm not surprised philosophically, but I didn't know that he says this about other religions in such a clear, explicit way. I think it's a very important thing that he says. And there are many, many religious Jews who claim to hold the values of HaRav Kook. But I think I have to send them this paragraph for them to study, But I also see positive in them as well.
Of relationship with like priests or imams, or like, you know, I know that you wanted to make closer religious and non-religious, but what about the other religion?
I don't know. Good question. I don't know.
What's the question?
The question was, Natalia asked, do I know about HaRav Kook having relationships personally with leaders or representatives of other religions? I was in the past, I'm still on the WhatsApp group of a group of rabbis. First of all, we had a group of rabbis who met with with um with some Muslim imams, sheikhs, and there was also a group that met and studied with different Christian. We studied on Zoom with different Christian people, including Christian clergy. We studied on Zoom, some of them in Europe, some of them in Israel, and we studied together. I just, for lack of being able to do everything you want to do in life, have not been active in the group. And there's another group. I still get the invitations to the meetings, but I just haven't been able to follow it. And there's another group of rabbis, Jewish rabbis, religious rabbis, who the leader of the group is comes from the yeshiva world of HaRav Kook, and they're studying the attitude of Judaism towards other religions. In the past, it was, I think now, see, again, I'm not sure exactly what they're studying. It was Christianity. I think now they're dealing with Islam, but still, his knowledge was very much on a Talmudic halachic level. And I think that when I was in the group, I would mention things to him that were new to his more philosophical thought about Rav Kook. So it could have been a very constructive relationship for the two of us to study together. He would teach me some things, and I could bring light to him in other ways. I would really like to do that, but I haven't had the time. Can't do everything. Good question, Itael. I wonder if anyone else of my acquaintances knows the answer to that question. I will try to ask. Yes.
Hi. Um, an interesting sort of variant on that might be my youngest brother married to a Catholic. Actually, interestingly, her family was more upset than mine was. Leave that out. Um, anyway, they talked about it, and they agreed that because religions today cause so many problems, that they would just be happy just doing nothing. So they went around doing nothing for a while from that perspective, until they had a couple of kids. And the kids started growing up. They were toddlers. Then they started getting into young adolescence. And my brother and sister-in-law realized that they didn't have a structure of any kind in which to give them the kind of basic moral teachings that they wanted to give them. They could try to do it completely amorphously, completely theoretically, but that didn't seem to be getting anywhere. They felt like they needed a structure. And after they talked about it, and after they'd looked at lots of friends and things, my sister-in-law decided that Judaism was probably a really good place to be, and that they would get a lot of structure out of that, and a lot of morality and good teaching, and that's how they'd bring up the kids. And then this was in the Reform at that point, but my sister-in-law converted Reform, and my two cousin, nephew and niece, they converted. So, and
Also
that's how they
Reform?
continue to go, because they feel like
The
they get
nephew and niece
something
also
from it.
converted Reform?
Yeah. But it's sort of like what you said, that they feel like they get something from it.
Right.
and that's where their advantage is.
That's a fascinating story, Don. Interesting. This is your brother?
This is my youngest brother. Yeah, they
He's
live in
alive?
yeah they live in Seattle now.
In Seattle,
Seattle,
uh,
Washington, upper
Seattle,
west
Washington.
coast of the U.S.
Yes, yes.
About as far from here as you can be without changing to yet another continent. That's 10 hours
Well,
time
you could go to
zones.
Alaska, but
Yeah,
very interesting. Are you in touch with him?
yeah. I mean, and in fact, I've just spoken to him within the last couple of days, catching up. Just
That was a really interesting story, Don. Thank you.
yeah. But it's some of what you said that made me think about that, because
Yeah.
it's about what you can accomplish, not what you can destroy.
Beautiful
Okay.
said.
Thank you.
Beautifully said.
Any other comments? Eliezer, bevakasha.
So, yes, anyway, I think that many non-Jews still are ethical, not necessarily out of fear of being punished by a
By a
by
god.
an icon,
Yeah.
something like that.
A statue.
That's true. And in fact, the ancient Greeks, they had this elaborate polytheism, which the smarter ones didn't take seriously. Like Socrates and Plato.
Well, how religious were Socrates and Plato?
They had their own, they were,
And why was Socrates executed?
well, that was.
Blasphemy. People thinking
probably
independently.
Because of his relationships with students, but Aristotle also was, is highly thought of by Rambam, and Rambam chose certain things,
Right.
and rejected other things.
But again, he believed in Aristotle, for example, had a philosophical understanding of something higher that from which the world emanates, but I don't know that he had any kind of religious way of life or belief in any kind of religion, whether it was idolatry or, I mean, there wasn't
Right.
Christianity yet, or
So,
the only choices were idolatry or Judaism at the time. But
what I'm trying to say is that he didn't choose Judaism, but he had a kind of. No, you're right. He probably didn't. I mean, I don't know. Like I would expect that he didn't have any specific religion,
right.
Except so.
Well,
Maybe.
to take the two of the people you mentioned, I don't know if Aristotle saw value in teaching or studying philosophy that would make people better or the world better. Socrates obviously did think that was.
He wrote the ethics.
Yeah. Okay.
No question
Okay.
in that.
Yeah.
And then in more recent times also, there are, non-Jews who try to make the world a better place.
Oh, sure, of course.
So
Can't count them beyond numbers.
So yeah, so I think that there's that dimension also, that you have, basically good people.
Yeah.
Who might be good, not even out of fear of
Yeah,
being
yeah.
punished.
No, I think the examples for myself, the example that HaRav Kook chose is I would say an extreme and simplistic example. I'm assuming is the way I would think about it, and therefore maybe I'm how do you say, explaining or understanding HaRav Kook according to my own understanding, but I think that that's what HaRav Kook would say. Of course, there are more intricate and complex situations. He's trying to present an idea by using the most basic way of presenting it. And of course, the same idea can exist in much more complex situations. And it's not to say that all people who are idol worshippers are only carry out ethics because they're afraid of the statue in their living room. I don't think he means that. I think he's taking a very simple understanding of it, but it's true in many different ways. And growing from that to higher levels is always a process as an individual, so much more so as a society, as a nation, as a religion. And there are certainly people out there who think about these things and want to help their religion move along in some ways, including Jews, including rabbis who think that some of the things are, we still need them because that's what where the people are, but we'd like to help them make a process that's more positive. I would think that's true all over. But certainly the Greek philosophers are another interesting example to compare to and to think about.
Tova has a comment.
Tova, you're next after Mark. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to disrupt the idea of ladies first. The division into three, I mean, if you don't mind if I go back a little bit, the division into three categories is very interesting to me. And it makes perfect sense. It indeed makes perfect sense from, I think, a historical point of view, where the environment was the environment, let's say, of the Egyptians with the sun god and the cat god and all these individual gods, and the Greeks and the Romans who also had their own individual gods and the idols to go along with that. But I'd like to, if you don't mind, and maybe it's totally superfluous and a diversion unnecessary, but let me suggest a category 3A, if you like. So I don't want to suggest a fourth category. That would be, in keeping with my, what do you call it? My blasphemous beliefs. But here we go. I think it's possible to believe, and there are beliefs, I think, that do not believe perhaps in a single creator, and yet do not have statues of idolatry. And I'm thinking particularly of, although I don't understand a lot of it, and I don't have a depth of knowledge, but I'm thinking particularly of Native Americans in North and perhaps even Central and South America, where there was a belief in nature as a you might want to say divine or supernatural, whatever characterization you want. But I don't think there was any idol worship. I don't think there were statues. And yet there was an ethics, an evolution of how to live as people in a society. I don't know anything about it, but it seems to me that might be a 3A, or if I dare suggest perhaps fourth category, that would have been completely unknown, if you like, to peoples in the Middle East.
There may be. I would, another one of the things that I would like to do, that I'm not going to have time in this life. I have many plans for coming back in all kinds of incarnations because there's so many things that I still want to get done. And one life won't be enough. I would like to study comparative religions. There's so much to know out there and so much to study in light of what HaRav Kook is saying. Let's take one religion that I'm not familiar with. We've mentioned Hinduism. Somebody mentioned Hinduism the previous session. And I do know that I mentioned that there's a new kind of, what do you call, periodical that comes out, and it's only had the first one so far. So it's not even a periodical yet, unless there's another one. But in the first volume, I read a 30, 40-page article about Christianity. And the point was that Christianity is evolving over generations, and that the attitude, the religious attitude, the halachic attitude, I'm not talking about being careful because of anti-Semitism, not to beat up a nun on the streets of Jerusalem because somebody else is going to beat up a Jew somewhere in the world. I'm talking about saying that the article claims, these are rabbis writing it, that Christianity has evolved, that still keeps certain idolatrous customs, but they don't really believe in the idolatry of it. They're doing it to connect to the idea of the one God above, or to, I still see Jesus in there. It depends how much of it in different religious Christian sects, but in any case, that it's going through a certain process. And again, it's not to say that now everything about Christianity is okay and we accept it totally. It's to say that the negative aspects that were in the Jewish society towards Christianity, the kind of more, I wouldn't say physically violent, but the attitude that was very aggressive towards Christianity in the past is not the right way to go today from a halachic perspective, from a perspective of studying the Talmudic sources and the halachic decision makers over 2,000 years, that we should be moving in a different direction of something which is more, which is creates boundaries and says absolutely this we don't do, but for them that's still okay. And if this process of evolution continues, so one day they will reach a point that will be, again, even more different or closer to us. So that I think we need to do. And I'm sorry, the second article, which I haven't gotten to, even though it's been a few months, is about Hinduism. So someone there is a rabbi who has something to say about our attitude towards Hinduism. Okay, thank you. I have to make a note to read that article as well. And so then I may have something to say about Hinduism or about what somebody has to say about Hinduism. There's a lot of work to do to get into all kinds of things. I am familiar with something HaRav Kook wrote that I'm familiar with for decades already about looking into the libraries of other nations, because the library tells you a lot about the culture, about the attitudes towards all kinds of things. Again, I need so many lifetimes to do all this. I'm not going to be able to, but at least have a basic attitude that there's something here for me to study. If I meet someone, if I'm walking around in the world and I see a book, I meet a person from a different religion, from a different culture, I will probably seriously have serious, deep disagreements with him, but that does not mean that I have nothing to listen to that he has to say or to study or to listen to him attentively, because there's something there for me to understand. So it changes your perspective when you meet other people of other religions, of other cultures, definitely. It influences it in a very major way. Tova, and then Michael.
I find that the article there's a lot of apologetics in the article. That the attitude, the place where he comes from is to apologize. That's how I about Judaism.
In which article?
And what we just read from the HaRav Kook, what you just read
Kook is
today.
being apologetic?
I think he's trying to mollify the other religions. He's talking in a very soft language,
Yes.
and he's trying to not to upset anybody. But yet I understand what he's doing, but it's somehow I'm not happy with the fact that he's giving credits to these religions, uh, by trying to say that maybe they're not that bad, maybe they have some good things in them, but which is nice, but it doesn't. I don't see anybody. I don't see where it's going to. Who is
Okay, I would say, going back to the article that I have read, that it's important, and we don't see it here because HaRav Kook, you look at his daily life, this is not what he was doing daily. I mean, I go back to Natara's question. Did he put some space in life to meeting with, I'm sure he did as chief rabbi, meet sometimes with the leaders of other religions, but
right?
was it just a public ceremony that he had to say hello and shake hands? Or did he look for it in a deeper way? That's an interesting question for me. But in his daily life, he was performing Judaism, carrying out Judaism, following Judaism, teaching Judaism, strengthening Judaism, including the halachic boundaries of it. I think if you read that article that I've mentioned, you see it. The article clearly puts in place the religious boundaries that we do keep, even though some things that were accepted in the past, we don't have to keep up in such a negative way. We do have to keep clear boundaries between us and them. I would say that on two levels. One is in a halachically abiding way. There are things that are wrong to do halachically that I would not do halachically, and they include some like decisions of rabbis about drinking wine or eating, or the laws about bishul akum and things like that. Or it might be about statues or religious artifacts that, in spite of their being less idolatrous, nonetheless these should be forbidden to us and things like that. Or we certainly shouldn't be influenced by them and all kinds of things like that. And that's one realm. Another realm is educational, meaning there are things that I would consider halachically permissible, but I would ask myself as an educator, where is the right place to draw the line? As I've mentioned in the past, it's one thing for me to read a certain religious text of other religions and think about it. And it's another thing for me to bring it to a class of children growing up, or to my, it would be different for me to discuss it with my children who are all in their 30s, or to discuss it with my grandchildren who are either in their zeros or in their teens, not zeros, in their single numbers or in their teens. There's a difference. And so I think it's, you have to look at HaRav Kook in a more complete picture. There is a HaRav Kook of the halachic decisions where he's saying this is forbidden. You can't do that. You don't have to be aggressive towards them, but we are not allowed to take part in some things that they do. Or in a different sense, maybe it's even permissible, but I'm going to refrain from it because I am a leader of a large group of people and I don't want to give them the wrong, a mistaken message. So, I think you have to put that together with what he's writing here, and then you get the more complete, complex picture of what HaRav Kook is doing. I don't think he's being apologetic here. He is being very soft. You're right. I think in this piece he's being soft because he wants to say, don't be aggressive towards them. Be soft like I'm being here. At the same time, don't lose the boundaries and the limits of the separation and the halachic obligations towards them. So I think you have to see HaRav Kook and all his different, in all the different ways that he reveals himself, that he brings himself to us, that he presents himself to us. This is part of it. And I think that people who only take the halachic restrictions miss this part. And they will be very aggressive, and they don't know, like I didn't know, that HaRav Kook writes this. And there are other people who will take only this piece, and they don't want to hear about restrictions and boundaries, and they'll think that HaRav Kook is just another liberal who doesn't care about which religion you believe in. It can be Judaism or anything else, and that's certainly not true. So I think you have to find the right, put the different aspects of HaRav Kook, put them together to have a whole picture of what he's saying after you take the different messages and put them together. Michael.
So I'm glad that I followed what Tova said, because it gives me I have a slightly different take. I understand completely what she was saying, but to me, what I heard is that Rav Kook was very pragmatic, and that I think he was looking at how our behavior may affect what the people around us do. And we would like to live in a world where they do better. If we push our beliefs on them because we think they're the best, it may not work out so well. Be careful what you ask for. You may get it. There are many more different rules for Jews than for non-Jews. What we really want from non-Jews is to behave nicely and let us live our lives, and maybe gradually improve the way they see the world. A question popped up in my head. Does Hashem and the Torah say that idol worshippers have to be treated the way that we're recommended to treat them because of what they believe, or is it because of what they did? When we talk about being thrown out of the land, I think the language is if you do what they did, the land will spit you out, not necessarily just for believing what they believed. It's actions that seem to change the world. And in the world we live in today, I think that's in our face every day. Especially the more liberal Jews that have taken bits and pieces of Judaism and formed, I think, a new religion out of it. And they have made us, their so-called fellow Jews, the enemy because of we're now oppressors instead of co-religionists, things like that. You have to honor the immigrants because we were strangers in the land of Egypt, and therefore anything immigrants do is the best thing that it can possibly be. And if you don't believe that, you're a bad person. I can go on, but I really think what Rav Kook is saying is be careful. Be pragmatic about how you approach these other people and encourage their good qualities. Don't push them so hard. And you started out this way with this story of these people in Jerusalem that are attacking Christians. They may believe in their heart of hearts that we'd be better off without Christians, but they're going to wind up making enemies of people that we can live with peacefully for no reason.
Okay. I'll address a few things that you said. I certainly see a taint of pragmatism in what HaRav Kook is saying, but I think it's much more than only pragmatism, because I think he's really saying that it's important to see the positive. And again, I'd like to compare HaRav Kook here towards non-Jews to HaRav Kook towards non-religious Jews, in the sense of seeing the positive, connecting to the positive. It's not, there is a sense of pragmatism there also, but it's also a deeper belief in something that's going on there, which is more than what meets the eye initially. And I do see the softness in him. But again, I'll get back to that at the end. You mentioned the nations of Canaan who were thrown out, and you will be thrown out if you act like them. Absolutely, Michael. They were not thrown out for their beliefs; they were thrown out for their actions, and that's an important message there. That if you study the history, I mean, I have been awakened to this 10, 20 years ago, but even more so after October 7th, to understand if this is what the nations of Canaan looked like, then I totally understand why they had to be thrown out. Okay. So, it's not a matter of they believe in something, it's the way they act, of course. But again, it's a message for us. If you act in the same way with a different set of beliefs, we're no better. So we have to be very wary of that. So that certainly is part of the picture. But I would say, and going back to the pragmatism and to Jewish liberals and so on, first of all, the whole world, it's not only Jewish liberals, the whole world is kind of going to these crazy extremes of all kinds of things, whether it's alt left or alt right. It's a lot of craziness and of positions. You're in a certain group, therefore the guys in the other group are all wrong. It doesn't matter what they say. And yesterday I said it, but today they're saying it, so I'm against it. And all kinds of crazy things. But I'm going back to what I said before. I think if you look at HaRav Kook in his whole picture, the halachic part of it, the Talmudic part of it, and the philosophical part of it, you'll see the complexity. And I am opposed to Jews, and I think I'm following HaRav Kook in saying this. Everybody can always say to me, "Oh, you're just interpreting HaRav Kook the way you want him to be saying." But I think I'm being influenced by HaRav Kook and not telling HaRav Kook what to think. But I oppose people who take one or the other, who take only the respect HaRav Kook has to other people, other nations, other religions, Jewish, non-religious Jews, and so on, and claim it's only pragmatism. I think there's a depth there. And I oppose certainly to taking only that aspect and not taking the aspect of commitment to halacha and of boundaries and of things where we say, this is us, we don't do that, and things like that. Just like I oppose the opposite extremism of people who only take the boundaries and don't take the softness and the respect that HaRav Kook is, and the pragmatism. Sometimes people are not pragmatic because they're lacking a sense of softness. I'm going back to Tova, it's not necessarily apologetics. It can be that there is a trait of softness. It's one thing to fight against, to struggle against other religions, and being soft towards people is not necessarily only apologetics. It can be a belief that this is the right way to do it, or find a certain balance. But I think we always have to look at it in a more complex picture. There are different aspects, different sides to Judaism, and there are certainly different sides to HaRav Kook. And one of the things that Rav Tzvi Yehuda, HaRav Kook's son, wrote about him is that different people find in HaRav Kook one thing that they believe in. But what they don't understand is that he has a lot of different aspects. And I'll mention another person, a person named Yechezkel Cohen, has passed away, but maybe he was about my age when I was in yeshiva, and he created a certain movement. I'm not going to get into that, but I wrote to him a quote of HaRav Kook, supporting the movement that he had created, supporting the idea that he was promoting, and he surprisingly wrote back to me a criticism. Instead of writing back to me, thank you so much for supporting, you such a beautiful quote of HaRav Kook, it's all in my favor. He said to me, be careful with HaRav Kook, because you'll find a quote in favor of my opinion. You'll also find a quote in favor of the guys of the other opinion. So HaRav Kook is more complex. And I appreciate that he wrote that to me, because he taught me that, you have to look at the whole picture and not only, oh, good, this is a good quote for me today. I'll take this one. I'm going to ignore the others. And I like to see the different quotes and create a more wholesome picture in my mind, because it's more true. Rav Kook truly had different aspects. I believe Judaism has different aspects. It does create boundaries of belief, boundaries of action, certainly, and pragmatism. And it's not only pragmatism, it also has philosophical and spiritual depth on both sides. And anyone who's going to choose one side or the other and ignore the other aspect, I'll say softly, I'll disagree with him. Whether I'll be aggressive or not is a different question. I'm afraid we have to end, okay, because it's late already.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Again, we have another break because next week is a wedding. And 2 weeks, Bezat Hashem, we'll meet again. It will be 48 hours before Shavuot. And then after Shavuot. So the next time in 2 weeks will be Hebrew. And we'll meet again after Shavuot.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Laila Tov. Don, he just got off. Okay. We wanted to say, Don, maybe you'll watch the recording.